Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Leadership Lab series. I'm your host, Adam Harris. Today, I'm joined by the CEO of PowerCo, James Kilty. Hello, James.
Hello, Adam. Nice to see you.
Let's kick off. You've been in the role just over a year.
Yes.
Some people are watching might go, I've seen PowerCo, I've seen the branding. Yeah. What does PowerCo do?
PowerCo owns and operates electricity distribution system and a gas distribution system around central North Island. It's a big network ranging from sort of Coromandel, Tauranga right down to in the gas network down into Wellington, and of course here in New Plymouth, Manawatu and into Hawke's Bay. So quite a big, extensive reach of an organisation. And I've just fallen into the traditional trap of describing us by assets, which is not really who we are.
Yep.
Who is PowerCo? We've done a bit of thinking about that in the last year, and we're about 500 extremely passionate people from all around the world, actually. I was going to say passionate Kiwis, but people, because we've got lots of people from all around the world, which is awesome. And we're here to connect communities. We bring enormous capability, the ability to bring capital from our shareholders, and wonderful technical expertise to deliver the infrastructure that New Zealand needs to keep communities connected, come what may. So that's really who we are, and we own some assets along with it.
Awesome. So people is a big thing, and I want to hold that, and I want to come on to it. Just want to delve a little bit deeper about you. So you were a deputy CEO for a number of years. I'd love for you to share the difference between being a deputy and then sitting at the top of the table.
Lots of people told me you wouldn't know the difference until you did it, and they were right. I'd done a lot of reading about that transition to a CEO role. As CEO, you really are at the sort of the interface between the organisation and the outside world, all of its stakeholders. And you are, if you think about your team, you're on your own. Mm-hmm. A team, and we talk about this at PowerCo, who are your team? And lots of people think about it in a hierarchical sense, either the people that ultimately report through me. Our leaders are starting to recognise that their team are their peers across the organisation, other people they can go to lean on for support.
Yep.
Well, as the CEO, that's not there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the biggest difference, I think. The buck stops with you for everything. And it is different to being the deputy, where you take accountability. Mm-hmm. To be in a role like that, you have to take accountability for outcomes, you manage board processes, you do all the substantive things that a CEO might do, with the difference being the buck doesn't stop with you if it all goes wrong.
So how have you dealt with that support? Where and who do you lean on internally and externally to make sure that you're being sane? But when you were the deputy, you could go to the CEO and go, hey, look, this is what I'm thinking. Yep. Who do you speak to now? Because it is a really isolated place.
Yeah, so on business issues, my leadership team are amazing. So I lean on them heavily for their advice and support. If it's an issue where I don't feel comfortable talking to a member of the leadership team about it around broader market, I've got an extensive network of people I lean on. I've had a lot of support from Nigel, Nigel Barber, former CEO at PowerCo. We work really well together, so he's been awesome. My chairman's really good, John Laughlin. He's had a really interesting career and has scars on his back. So he's had an interesting background, being a CEO, not just come up through a pure governance world. And he's been a CFO and a CEO, dealt with all of the many things that you have to deal with. And so he's a good ear to chew from time to time. That said, he's my chairman, so he's also the boss. So I do have a network of people outside the organisation I go to test thinking with. At a personal level, it's my wife. That's the most important, and that's the most important support.
Family is really important to you, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's why I do my job. It's why I've always done what I've done, worked what I believe is hard, probably no harder than anyone else, has been to try and create a better future for New Zealand, and thereby a better future for my children to be in, and been lucky enough to be in roles where have been able to influence some good outcomes and do things that I think are good for New Zealand.
Where did that passion and desire to want to do more and do better for New Zealand, where did that come from?
I think there was no light bulb moment. It evolved and emerged as I grew up. And I mean, grew up in the workplace, not grew up as a child. Was lucky enough through my parents to get what I think are a good set of personal values and putting family at the centre of your world, and service to family and others as a core value. And what I found through when I started work, I'm a lawyer by training, and I practiced law for 5 years externally in one of the big law firms. I started to realise that whilst as an advisor to people I could make a difference, I had a reasonable instinct for decision making and getting stuff done. And I sort of went in-house as a lawyer, and then left the law and went into business roles. And it was through that realisation that I could affect change, that I realised I needed to direct it somewhere aligned with my own values, which brings you full circle back to making stuff better for our kids and our grandkids. So that's where that comes from.
So how did you go from law then into the energy? Did you go into being like in-house lawyer within an energy firm?
At Contact.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I transitioned in-house at Contact. Really enjoyed, it was in the early days of the market, and the sector was finding its way from government ownership into private ownership. Customers as people to be served, looked after and loved, rather than strange beings on the end of assets. And my own views matured through that whole early period of market development. What comes with that is, and what's been retained I think from in our industry, is a deep sense of commitment to deliver for New Zealand. I think that remains a big part of the energy industry in New Zealand. There's a real commitment.
Where does that commitment, do you think, come from?
It comes from, I think, from being an essential service.
Okay.
We're very lucky to have such a highly renewable system in New Zealand, as we know, but just the sense that it's an essential service and that's not going to change. And so, when you're not delivering, people suffer. And so there's a real accountability and responsibility that goes with that. And over that period, I think my maturity has gone a lot alongside the industry's maturity to understand, to turn that into a real customer focus and service mentality.
So going from not knowing anything about the sector and the space, what's the one thing that has really surprised you over the years, and what's the one thing that's kind of exciting you for the future?
Great question. What has surprised me? Looking back, I think what surprises me is we have been slower than we could have been at really understanding what customer focus and customer-centric activity looks like. Still as an industry at times we're a little bit asset focused rather than people focused. There's still got a journey to go on there. What excites me for the future is the fact that is new technology, the drive for an electrified economy and decarbonisation just gives us enormous challenges and opportunities.
Yep.
All of which need to be solved with the customer at the centre. And so what for a long time in a reasonably stable market enabled us to slowly develop a customer culture and understand it and play with it in a very intellectual sense, that's done. Now's the time for action and change.
Yeah.
And that has to be driven by customer expectations. So we have to meet them.
James, we've just been talking about customer expectations. You're really big on people, and we'll come on to kind of internally, but how do you understand and get to know what customers need and want?
There's heaps of complicated answers to that question. The most effective way is to listen, and which means going out with an open mind and engaging on what people really think. And we need to do more of that. We're making, I think, some really good strides in that direction. That's both households, small to medium enterprise, and the big industries and things. What do they need from an essential service like us? How do we help them fulfil their goals, and in particular their goals to decarbonise and electrify their futures? So marketers would say that's there's a lot of complex science around all of that. Ultimately, it's just going and listening to people.
Do you think a lot of organisations have lost the art of just listening? First and foremost listening, and second of all asking for it. Do you think that it's kind of been diluted over the years?
I don't know if I'm even qualified to answer that. I think as a society, our ability to listen for intent, to listen to truly hear someone, is reduced. Again, probably not qualified to talk about it, but it feels to me like, I really do feel like we move quickly, or more quickly now, to judgment and drawing conclusions than perhaps we used to. I have no idea if that's a technology thing, social media and the likes, but it does feel a little bit like that to me, that the days of talking, kanohi ki te kanohi, there's nothing like it face to face and truly trying to hear what someone's saying. We need to work on that across all elements of life.
Do you feel that a lot of people listen to respond as opposed to listen to understand?
Yeah, I think that's a nice way to say it, drawing connections that aren't there. But I wonder, Margaret Thatcher once, 1980s, drawn Maggie Thatcher, but she said, people now seem to want to be someone rather than do something. And if you want to be someone, your mouth's open a lot and you're talking. If you want to do something, you actually, if you listen, you can work out better how to help.
Is there any practical or specific things that you have done, in your years where you can kind of demonstrate and to kind of go, this is what I do to put myself in a position of either listening in internally or from a customer perspective?
Try and get out and talk to customers as much as it's humanly possible within the constraints of other responsibilities, and talk a lot with the representatives of customers, including local councils, local authorities, central government, to understand what they're worried about on behalf of Kiwis as well, and how we need to best serve those ends to meet the needs of customers. If we go back to specifics, a few years ago I did a lot of work on electrification and decarbonisation for industry in New Zealand, which is where it still appears that the best bang for buck for decarbonisation in New Zealand is transport and industry. And that's where we can do best for customers and for the globe. And in doing that work, went out and spent a lot of time with customers who, at the household level, were stuck. That everyone wanted to do something to help climate change. People couldn't afford, and probably many still can't afford, an EV. So what do you do at home? Well, the answer is you're a bit stuck and you feel like you can't do much meaningful activity. But when you go to work, at work you've got a budget, and at work you've got other resources, and so you can do stuff in your workplace that feels a bit beyond you at home. And this is 5-year-old insight, so things would have moved on, but that was a real insight for me to say the place to start, not only because it's the best bang for buck, but because it's where people felt enabled, was at work. Start with our commercial businesses, our industries, to help them electrify their vehicle fleets, to help them find a path forward for their processes and heating, and et cetera, and onto a lower carbon source of fuel.
So I was going to ask you about this, the aspect of decarbonisation, because we hear a lot about it, especially more in this region than others. And the kind of drive towards the climate change and the levies, etc. Are we on track? Are we off track as a country?
I think we're at risk of being off track. We've only just set emissions reductions budgets and things as a country, so that's a big statement to say we're at risk of being off track. The risk is that we focus on the wrong things as a country. And it goes back to the bang for buck. What can you do that is meaningful and at a reasonable cost, so that the transition is in fact sustainable. Balances cost, environmental outcomes, and the reliability of the energy system. And where you start, transport and industry, and the government is moving things in that direction, which is really pleasing to see. And we as an industry need to swing it and make sure the focus remains on that. There's a lot of focus on the last few percent of electricity generation, for example, ensuring that becomes renewable. The government has a 100% renewable electricity system by 2030 goal. To be honest, that's a bit of a furphy, and I think is a distraction to New Zealand, and it's that sort of distraction that can put us off our targets. The effort that's going into the thinking around that should all be going into transport and industry in the near term to enable delivery of the Climate Change Commission's targets. And I think that will enable a more sustainable transition as well. We have to remember, at the moment, the electricity target's the wrong target anyway. It's an energy system target we need to focus on. electricity is about 24% of the energy consumption in the country. That's all.
Yep.
Right? It needs to get to 50, 60, 70% and beyond. And if it maintains a small amount of thermal generation so that we can support the intermittency of solar and wind and other renewable sources, then that's fine. It'll still be a net climate change benefit as electricity moves up that chain and delivers more and more of the energy for the country.
I hear you speak with such clarity and energy and passion. I'm just interested, what did you want to do when you were growing up?
Play cricket for New Zealand.
Okay.
I love cricket.
Right.
I was very bad at it, unfortunately, but I love it. One of the things that I do to clear my head is take my boys to the nets. I coach my youngest cricket team, which I love. Great kids, they're full of energy. All of them want to be Brendan McCullum, or these days they want to be Devon Conway or someone like that.
Yep.
All of them are trying to play lap shots at age 12, all these reverse shots. So I've just learned to hit the ball straight first. But they're awesome, and I get a lot of joy out of seeing them succeed. Because they do, when they hit a four, their faces light up. When they get someone out, the one of the few balls in the over that's actually straight, they light up. And they're actually getting quite good now. They're getting to an age where they are quite good. So, no, I love it.
And what else do you do to relax?
We've got, I've spent lots of time with family.
Yeah.
I love, my daughter is a very, very good artist. So she draws. And so I like to spend time with her doing bad drawing on my part, but just spend time with her while she's doing her art. We play a lot of games. And I exercise. That's a stress relief thing for me. So pretty much every day, I will do some form of exercise. When I turned 40, my wife gave me a exercycle. And I said, it's pretty subtle, isn't it?
Yeah.
So she turned 40 a few months later, and I bought her, she bought me a rowing machine. So a few months later, I'm a February baby, she's April, I bought her an exercycle. I said, touche, there you go. So over the ensuing years, we've now got we've taken half, we've got a double garage, half of it has now got exercise gear in it.
Cool.
And so you can get up in the morning, go and do something, or come home, from work and get out there and do some exercise. I'm a corporate warrior. I'm not interested in running marathons or anything like that. For me, it's mental relief as much as the physical exercise.
Yeah.
And the other thing I've done connected to cricket is I bought a cheap TV, shoved it in the garage, and I can beam up sport from my phone up to the screen.
Yep.
And then I can do an hour's exercise and watch sport, which is awesome.
Brilliant.
I had 3 months off between jobs, and I watched almost all of the Caribbean Premier League last year.
Wow.
That's a lot of wasted time.
Well, if you're exercising, it's effective use of time, isn't it? I'm here with James Kilty, CEO of PowerCo. James, what's become really clear for me, not just in speaking to you today, but also looking at your profile, is that you have this thing where you describe that it's all about people. And it's clear in hearing you speak. Where does that come from?
It's both a feeling and a thought. So the logic is, to get anything done, you need people. People say, automation's coming, everything's going to be automated. Who does that? I know there'll be AI and learning and things, but you still need people to think. You need people to be able to interact successfully to get anything done. Very few individuals can go fast, but they can't go far. You need a team to go far, and you need a team to maintain and sustain progress. And so you've got to have people to be able to interact with each other. I guess the feeling part of it is, why else would you do anything if it wasn't to sort of make people's lives a bit better, Whether that's your customers who you're serving, your investors who you're ensuring you're delivering returns to, and your people you get the privilege to work with. I don't know why you'd bother if you weren't interested in helping them, have a happy life.
But does that come from an early age at school? Does it come from the values that you got from your parents?
I think it comes very much from my father and mother.
Okay.
My father was a high school principal and very, very people focused, loved the kids. He used to have this lame saying that every student who went to Tauranga High School would know, which is, life is like a bucket, what you put in you get out. And he used to always do these boring speeches. It was very embarrassing because I went to that school, and talk about that part of filling your bucket is ensuring you're being a good person, serving the people around you. And if you do that, you'll get it in return, of course.
So you were never in his office for being naughty?
No, only the deputy principals. That was conflicted.
You speak about the aspect of people being supported, trusted, empowered, and accountable. When you go into a team or an organisation where that's not necessarily front of mind, how do you enact kind of the change and lead through that?
I think the first step, again, I've said I feel the first step is to feel the vibe. You've got to listen to people and listen to their full selves. Everyone has got physical tells, and so take time. Don't, even though you think you already know the answers, take time to listen and hear and truly understand what might be going on, and then test your thinking. So at PowerCo, for example, when I first started, I did a lot of listening, and then I went out around the organisation, roadshow effectively, with no presentations, just questions, and did a lot of listening to understand what was great about the organisation, which is the vast majority of things were great, but there's always some areas where you can invest some time and improve. Leadership is one area where we can continue to improve, so we've spent a bit of time on that.
So the concepts around people, is there any specific thought leaders or resources that you've looked at over your years that has helped? I'm not going to say inspire, because it's clear that you had it from an early age, but it's kind of cemented your thoughts and your ideas.
I've learned something from everyone I've ever worked with, good, bad and indifferent, and that very judgmental terms. They're just different, right? Everyone's got a different style. I was lucky enough to do a management program at Chicago booth, and I had all these swirling ideas, concepts. I'd read a lot of books, as everyone does, and had done a brief leadership program at Harvard many years ago, and it sort of all cemented with me under Professor Harry Davis, who led the management program at Chicago booth, and he led us through a series of facilitated sessions and lectures and sort of formal sessions and informal sessions where you really did solidify your own approach, or he created a space for you to solidify your own approach, and so I learned a lot from him. One of the things, he had this metaphor that I use a lot, which is, and it can sound inauthentic, but it's not, and it's drawn from, I guess, from Walt Whitman. I contain multitudes, we contain multitudes. He said, in any given moment as a leader, you have to decide which part of yourself to bring to the front of the stage. He used a stage metaphor. He said, all of you, as all the people are in the wings, and you can say, is this the time to bring this forward or this forward? It's not inauthentic to say, this is a moment where I need to be a little bit more like this rather than like that. And the corollary of that is being conscious enough and deliberate enough about that decision making. And I find that personally the hardest leadership challenge, and it's something that I'm very open with people at PowerCo about, that it is a challenge to make the right call all the time. It's a challenge to remember that you have to. It's the pause, the brief pause before stepping into a meeting room. It's those little moments where you give yourself the chance to bring the best part of yourself forward.
So at the times when you haven't given yourself the pause, and you've said or you've done something which isn't the way that you would want to act, how and what do you do as the follow-up to that?
It usually just means that whatever you've been in has been less effective than it could be, and so there's a need to follow up. There's in fact a responsibility and accountability to follow up and
ownership.
And lean in on whatever you've left to help set it right. And on occasions, and we do this now as a leadership team, I will actually say to the team, sorry, I know I stuffed that up. I wasn't present. Let's get back on that topic and have that, close that conversation, because you can have conversations as a leadership group, and we'll all have experienced this, and they just sort of fizzle out. And there's no real. So what does that mean? Are we aligned on this? Are we doing something, or are we happy just to have a conversation and leave it? That's got to be conscious. And when I'm not at my best in those moments, it just fizzles, and so I have to go back and take the team back to that point.
And you showing that that vulnerability actually empowers other people to do the same.
Well, I hope so. I think I can see in the team at PowerCo, I can see some people making very deliberate changes, which is awesome. And we've now expanded that into a wider leadership group, which is really fun.
Who are the mentors and coaches that have influenced your journey in your career?
I mean, there have been so many. I guess my father is probably the biggest. Yeah, he would be. Of work people, I learned heaps from all of the CEOs I worked for, and some of it was what not to do.
Yep.
I learned a heap from a guy who I won't name, who's he's an advisor to the industry now, but an outstanding thinker and a wonderful human, and just calm, always unflappable and calm, and that's something I've always tried to emulate. There's no panicking, never really helps anyone, and if your first port of call is how do I help this situation, particularly once you're in a leadership role, panicking, raising your voice, thumping a table, it just doesn't really achieve anything. Being calm, asking some difficult questions that you have to ask, but doing it in a way that makes people understand they're safe and can tell you the truth is key. So I learned a heap from that person about how to be in the workplace. I had a CEO who, whilst a really lovely, genuinely lovely person at heart, struggled at times to manage his temper, and that drove fear into an organisation, and I could see it all over the place, and it took a long time once I got senior enough to unpick that. It took a long time. It's an extraordinary amount of time. That person was well gone, and there was still fear in the organisation from responses to problems years ago. So you have to be so careful about managing that moment to catch yourself and how you're going to respond in any situation.
Leadership books or TED Talks that have inspired or helped you? Is there a couple that come to mind?
I do still like Waterman, In Search of Excellence. I think it's a great management book. Perhaps not leadership. I like Jim Collins on change. So the sort of traditional big authors, I guess. And this is an odd one, but I quite like, and they're bizarre, potentially for leadership texts, but Cormac McCarthy. Have you read any Cormac McCarthy?
No.
It's quite brutal and bruising, some of it, some of his writings, but it's beautifully written, and it contains a lot about the human condition. Tough read, a lot of it, but a lot about the human condition and the realities of people. And so I've taken a lot out of reminding myself that people are real, and they might be presenting in a particular way in a particular moment, but behind that there's an upbringing, there's kids, there's relatives, there's a sick parent, there's a something. Everyone's got something going on at all times. The human condition is one which can be challenging for everybody, and having enough heart to see that. And help people enjoy their work. Work can actually be a place where you get a bit of relief from some stuff at times.
Absolutely.
We know that. So making it safe enough for people to kind of be open about that is something that I would really love us to do more.
And it kind of goes back to that aspect of creating that pause in the fact don't go straight for judgment, and kind of going, actually we don't know what's going on for any individual at any moment in time. Last couple of questions. I know that you're based in Wellington, but you spend a lot of time up here. I'd love for you to share what your thoughts and observations are on the region here.
Well, Neil would like me to say you need the potholes fixed, but I love it here. I think it's a beautiful city. I love the waterfront run. I do that waterfront run when I'm up here, and the gardens are incredible. The energy sector is critical here, and it's not just critical here, it's critical to New Zealand. And I think we were discussing prior to this conversation, I think that this region promotes itself well around the country. So, I really love it. My impressions are that Taranaki Proud has its strengths and weaknesses, as always. The strength is the passion, the activity. The Chamber of Commerce here is incredible, it's active. Engagement with the political system is active. The potential weakness at times is, I wonder, I don't know, whether it can limit ambition beyond the region. PowerCo is a wonderful example of a business that, you know, its whakapapa is here, but it's expanded all around the North Island, and, you know, we hope to continue that. So the flip side of provincial passion can be forgetting that, you know, you can do big things from here, outside of the, you know, and take things outside the province, and the capabilities here to do it. You know, the energy sector and the investment from the energy sector has ensured that there's amazing capability in this region. So it's fun. I mean, I like it. I really do enjoy coming up here.
Good. Last question.
Yep.
If there was a book of your life to this point, what would the title be and why?
It would be How Did That Happen? And it would be that because I feel like, possibly like many people at times, I haven't had some grand plan.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
people think, oh, you're in your job, you must have had something. Not at all. I've turned up every day. I've invested in my family and a good life and great friends. Still work very hard on that, and invested in myself and understanding myself and learning about myself enough to try and be effective at work.
Yeah.
And because of that, some opportunities have opened up. But it would definitely, at times I look back and go, how on earth have I, little hopeless cricket player from Taradale and Hawke's Bay, gotten into an awesome role like this?
Yeah.
And I do pinch myself. So I think it would be, how did that happen?
Awesome. Thank you. I love your humbleness and your humility, and can see and understand the passion for people. This is the Leadership Lab. I'm Adam Harris. Until next time, bye for now.